Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, Machel and Santokie, and of course, with me as ever is my partner in crime, Santokie Nagulendran. Santokie, how you doing?
Yeah, I could be better, Mash. We're here reviewing the second test against South Africa. As most of you will know, would have seen the result. South Africa won by 40 runs. It went from miracle at Providence to pain at Providence as West Indies came so close but so far to securing a historic series win. South Africa took the W, and I think it's their 10th series on the bounce against West Indies that they've won. West Indies have never won a test series against South Africa comprising of more than one test. So that run continues. But Mash, I'd argue, we're going to get into the details, but I'd argue probably West Indies wouldn't have had a better chance to win a series against South Africa than what occurred, what unfolded in this second test at Providence, Mash.
Yeah, and I think let's get this straight, because people try to caveat loads of different things about this test series. And in fact, let me throw the caveat out there first. We lost 1-0, which in reality, given the draw at Queen's Park Oval, rain notwithstanding, and given the fact that we lost by 40 runs due to the lower order rearguard action in the second test, that's probably the closest in terms of test match series we would have had with South Africa since readmission. Some are going to say that 2007 tour where we actually won a test match in South Africa and lost 2-1, but I don't remember the other two test matches being particularly close. So on one side, if we really want to focus on and talk about positives, and if we get that out of the way, it was competitive. And I do think we have to give the team credit for that. As much as people want to talk about rain in the first test, we batted out the day, 201 for 5, and we didn't look like we were going to lose the test. As much as we were never going to win the second test, we only lost by 40 runs. King Multi putting up 45, a bit of a rearguard action on another day. If we hadn't given away the 60-odd runs for the 10th wicket partnership on day one, who knows what might have happened. But at the same time, Santokie, we have to acknowledge it's another L, and it's another L test series. And whilst I wouldn't do what lots of uncles would do and go, West Indies cricket, we're in the doldrums. What do we do now? Sack this man, drop that man, do this, do that. I'm not really going to do all that, but I will acknowledge that it's another L.
Yeah, and I think if you were looking for elite test match cricket, what you saw at Providence was not it. It was not elite cricket. However, controversially, despite the result, I will say I enjoyed the test match as a competitive match. It had ups and downs. Both sides were in it right until the end. If you're looking for West Indies positive, Shamar Joseph spell in the first innings, Jaden Seals star boy in the second innings, obviously Gudakesh Moti's cameo. So it was ups and downs. I would say it was a competitive test match compared to what we saw at Queen's Park Oval. It was entertaining, however it ended. And as you said though, Mash, to summarize, it was another L. We're coming off 3 L's in England. Despite what Craig Brathwaite said, we were almost an L in Queen's Park Oval. It was up against it. The rain sort of saved us, and now we take another L against South Africa at Providence. So it is a down bad situation, but at the risk of sounding like a broken record, Mash, don't we go through this at the end of every test? Essentially, the circumstances these players are coming through, inexperience, lack of first class cricket, it's always set up to be like this unless there's systematic changes. We're probably going to be saying the same thing series after series unless we're playing a Bangladesh or Zimbabwe. So do we focus on the individuals at this point, or do we just look at sort of the systematic issues which have kind of lead into these scenarios? Because it's a similar story, Mash. We could repeat what happened in the England series. Just players didn't have that experience and match awareness to kind of take us over the line or put up performances. And so it was disappointing, but like we always say, it was sadly expected at the end of the day.
Let me put in perspective. When we were I think Carty. It was either Carty and Hodge batting or maybe Carty and Brathwaite. And I tweeted something. I think we'd only lost 2 wickets, so it must have been Carty and Hodge maybe who were batting. And I tweeted at something like 50 something for 2. West Indies are going to lose this test match, but South Africa aren't significantly better than us. They just have a slightly better batting lineup than us. And a couple man came for me, Santokie, going, "You're so negative. That's a ridiculous statement to put out. We haven't even we could still win this match. We've only lost 2 wickets. The men are still batting. You might as well change your name to South Africa Cricket Podcast. What a ridiculous statement. Who do you think you are?" And all I was thinking when these people were atting me was, you lot don't watch West Indies cricket. And the thing is, Santokie, none of what I said was meant to be any kind of negative. I was just talking the law of probability and law of averages based on what we know and what we see with West Indies cricket suggests we are not going to chase 263. And it's not because we're just terrible. It's because we just won't chase 263. And as I said in the rest of the tweet, that doesn't mean South Africa are good. South Africa aren't that good either, right? I think that test match at Providence, to me, showed it was 2 weak sides playing weak test match cricket, but with 2 good bowling attacks, or maybe some people would want to say 2 bad batting lineups, whichever way they want to look at it. But South Africa just happened to have, let me put in perspective, Santokie, let me try and explain it this way. Vian Mulder bats number 7 for South Africa, and he averages 40 in first-class cricket. You go from numbers 1 through to number 7 for South Africa, and there is nobody in their top 7 who averages under like 37 or 38 in first-class cricket. Yes, that's not test cricket, but what we're talking about is the South African batting lineup just has a bit more pedigree behind it. Whereas if you go 1 to 7 in our batting lineup, we've got people in our batting lineup who they've not uprooted any trees in first class cricket, and they're literally trying to find their way in test cricket. So for me, it was just like, well, the difference between the 2 sides here is one's got a slightly better batting lineup, but our bowling attacks are relatively similar. And I thought that was just what was borne out in the test match and effectively across the test series.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the fact that South Africa won by just 40 runs, considering in our first innings, Jason Holder was the only one who put up substantial innings. Our second innings, disgracefully, Gudikesh Moti was the star batter in 45. So the fact that it got to that point where Gudikesh Moti was batted and South Africa were worried that we would get the win shows you just how bad the quality was in that test match, because any quality side would have demolished us if we played how we did against an Australia or in England or in India, for instance. So it was a bad side. And even if you compare it to the South Africa that toured in 2021, they had a Dean Elgar, Quinton de Kock, Nokia. So this South Africa side wasn't the same quality that we've seen. But as you said, they just had a bit more know-how to kind of get past it. But it wasn't, put it this way, South African fans aren't going to say that was a vintage South African performance. It was kind of like, oh.
They'll be pissed. Well, no, sorry.
Man said South Africans are doing cuss-out podcasts as we speak, you know.
Yeah, right now,
West Indies by 40.
Right now, there's a South Africa cricket podcast cussing, going, wait, we drew a test with these, man, and only beat them by 40 runs. We had King Moti nearly chasing down 263 against us. So I know right now there's a South Africa podcast going, wait a minute. This is the same team that England swept to one side, and we're struggling out here to try and put West Indies to one side. But you spoke about systemic things, Santokie, and let's talk about that, because I make you right in that. How many times can we say the same thing? And I don't want to get into. I'm fairly certain that after I've uploaded this, there's going to be the same arguments. In fact, let me list them now. So all of you tired uncles and all of you tired Ute men who West Indies cricket have just have made you question everything. Let me get your attack lines and arguments out of the way from now. So this is what you're going to say under this video. Craig Brathwaite should lose the captaincy. Craig Brathwaite should be dropped. Someone's going to say Josh Da Silva should be dropped. Someone's going to say Jason Holder shouldn't bat 6. Someone's going to say these top 6 are inexperienced. Like, we can all say this stuff.
But you forgot as well. If the other thing, if Hope was batting at 3, West Indies would have won this test.
Yeah. So the arguments repeat themselves after every single test series, and I think we said this after the first test, Santokie, when we did the first test review show, the live one. That I'm at a stage with West Indies cricket where you can tell me you want to drop this man, drop that man, drop whatever man. Nothing changes. Nothing will change. It does. New captain, nothing changes. Bring in 2 new players, nothing changes. Which is why, Santokie, I come back to you and I ask you the following question. Do we just stick with these guys and accept that it's going to be a long, slow, winding and painful road till maybe we beat someone other than Bangladesh or Zimbabwe? Or, and we do have to discuss this, does our top 6, forget the bowling attack, I think with the bowling attack, actually, there's quite a bit there to be happy about. Does the top 6 lack an experienced face? So, for example, Santokie, put yourself in Andre Kohli's shoes, or one of the data analysts around the region, scouts around the region, Craig Brathwaite, etc., and let's say, so Bangladesh come in September, in 3.5 months. Would you, and the top 4 names, again, are probably Hope, Chase. Before people say in the comments they don't want to play Test cricket, I have been reliably informed, so here's an exclusive if people don't know, I have been reliably informed that Hope and Chase do want to return to Red Bull. That's what I've been told by people who would know. So, Santokie, going back to you, would you look at someone like a Hope, Chase, Brandon King? Let's just say those 3. And say, boy, you know what? Those 3 have either previous test experience, however bad or good it was, or international experience, particularly in ODI cricket, which suggests that at least they understand the mentality that is needed at the international stage. Would you bring one of them back for their experience? I'm not saying they come straight into the side, or maybe they do, but would you bring one back, or do you think that is a self-defeating process to go backwards instead of forwards?
Yeah, 100%. I'm not bringing them back. I think, firstly, as you said, I think even Dr. Shallow, Cricket West Indies president, did say on local radio that Hope and Chase had been in discussions with Kohli in last month about returning to test cricket. However, my argument would be, all right, so you've got what? Carty, Afanase, Hodge, Louis, yeah, as the sort of 4 in the top order who are inexperienced. Yeah. All right, so say you drop Hodge, the man hit a century at Trent Bridge. Afanase hit 92 at Queen's Park Oval. So what are you dropping them based on? And secondly, what is the point of them going through this painful process of playing, the likes of Australia, England away, South Africa, and then dropping them? Because surely we should reap some sort of small benefit from the fact that they've come out of those tough tests, gained experience, played Test cricket, and can reap the rewards, cash in against Bangladesh. Surely that would be the goal, rather than throwing in guys who don't have outstanding Red Bull records. In the case of Shea Hope, has played, what, three or four first-class games in the last 3 years. Boston Chase, we know his sort of ceiling. We know what he can do. It's not great in Test cricket. And Brandon King, who's unproven. Because don't forget, there's no A-team tours at the moment. So someone like Brandon King, what's he going to do? Are we just going to throw him in? Are we going to base it on Super 50 performances before the Bangladesh series and say, all right, cool, if you knocked a big score in Super 50, let's try you out in Red Bull cricket? There's
Pause there, 1 sec. I actually think, and we can have this proper discussion another day. We might be at a stage in West Indies cricket where we can't wait for a first-class season anymore to see who's
No,
good
it's
enough.
true.
We're at a stage where, you know what, if you're in form, you're just in form, because we don't have a pool of players good enough to justify waiting like every 12 months to see who's going to score some runs in red ball cricket. Machel Louis just top scored in the red ball season, and right now he's going through the mire in Test cricket. Craig Brathwaite was second top scorer in the red ball season. He's going through the mire in Test match cricket. Carty was fifth top scorer. Well, he's just had a debut series. He's averaged 29. That's not bad. But the point is, what I'm trying to say to people is our red ball season is shit. It doesn't tell us anything. So we can't be waiting 12 months every run around for the red ball season to decide, you top scorer, you're coming in. It's got to be more than that.
Yeah. But then what can we do though because I get it, like, all right, so we play Super 50, but surely you can't just pick performances in another format. We don't play any other red ball cricket. If you're doing that, then you're essentially setting yourself up to fail just as much. So we don't have it's what we go back to, systematic issues. There's no system in place to call up players. If someone performs bad in July, there's no system in place.
There's nothing there.
Until they wait till next February, March. So basically, either you take a punt on someone who's you think's passed the eye test but not played any red ball cricket, or you back that player until the first class season resumes in February, and then you immediately drop them for the first man that scores a century in first class cricket. So
that's how Kurt McKenzie got in. So
so the system's not in place, and when you deep it, it's actually mad considering how long West Indies have played Test cricket for like 100 years. That we've got to a point where there's no actual logical system in place to pick a Test side. We're essentially going in blind, basically, and just hoping and praying whoever we throw into the Test side, whoever we throw a Test cap to, can somehow perform against all the odds. So basically, there's nothing in place to suggest anyone can perform well or develop. We just got to hope at this point. So I don't think we should drop this batting lineup. I think they are talented players. I think Afanase, Hodge are really talented players. Louis, I'm not so sure about, but he's just made his debut only a month ago in Test cricket, pretty much against England. So it'd be harsh to drop him. I would go with the same guys against Bangladesh, but at the same time, Mash, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw, Hope and Chase make that return against Bangladesh. Just because, like you said, as much as we talk about the developmental aspect of it, Test match cricket is a business. Cricket West Indies, we're looking at results. We've had 4 L's out of the last 5 matches we played, and 1 rained out draw. So based on trying to change those results, they might hit the panic button and recall the quote-unquote experienced players, even though their averages aren't great, to kind of come in and shore up against Bangladesh. Where would you go, Mash? Would you add some experienced players into that side, or would you at this point say, look, we'll go with these guys for Bangladesh at least?
So let me tell you something. Let me just tell you this. And the thing is, I want everyone to understand I have nothing against any of the players that I'm about to call. I'm just calling the facts and the stats. Kavem Hodge has now played 7 Test matches and averages 30. Machel Louis has played 5, averages 21. Alec Afanase has played 9 and averages 25. Carty's obviously just debuted. I am not using those numbers to say any of those 3 should be dropped. That's not the point I'm making here. But the point I am making is there is no justifiable explanation that anybody can give me as to why you wouldn't at least have an experienced guy in the squad. Doesn't mean that experienced guy has to play. But every single batter that I just called should not be going into Bangladesh thinking, well, my place is certain no matter what. Now, they can go in. I'm with you. I'm picking the same guys again because otherwise, what's the point of the process? But no player, and that goes in any sport, no player, apart from like Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, should ever think my spot is guaranteed no matter what. You're still supposed to be feeling under pressure in training. You're still supposed to be going into the nets thinking, rah, that man's hitting the ball well. Coach might drop me still because my man's looking good. He just hit a 75 in the warm-up game, and boy, maybe I'm not going to get a pick. I can't support complacency. And that's the only question mark I would have, which is, I'm not saying drop any of them, but I am saying we cannot create a culture of complacency. And I know there will be people who be like, why don't you say that about Craig Brathwaite? I'll say it about Craig Brathwaite as well, but the difference is we know that every single opener in the region is shit. So who you gonna drop Craig Brathwaite for? So he just gonna have to stay by default, right? So my argument would be, Santokie, is that I want an experienced guy called up to be in the squad at least. I'm not saying they have to play. And remember, before you come in, I just want to say this. They dropped Jermaine Blackwood for averaging 31 and saying he doesn't convert enough. So for me, that's now my metric, Santokie. And maybe we need to blame Desmond Haynes for this. But my metric now is the Blackwood metric. So if we are saying, right, you know what, Jermaine Blackwood, your last 10 test innings, you only scored 250s and you only averaged 31, and that's not good enough. Well, everybody who comes in better be averaging 31 as well then. Or we can't, how long, and I said this to you after the first test, there's no system, which I totally get your point, but how long is the rope, Santokie? Because if I take your Bangladesh argument, by the end of the Bangladesh series, let's say, God forbid, we lose that series, Santokie, West Indies cricket might as well disband after that. They might as well disband then, Santokie, because that is the wooden spoon battle, is it not? So if we lose a home test series to Bangladesh and men don't perform, for me, the rope doesn't extend any further because Bangladesh are rubbish. I'm not saying we're good, but they're also rubbish, right? Yeah. So do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, so my thing was I'm basing it on of the three names you threw up. Yeah, obviously Brandon King hasn't got the experience. He hasn't played Test match cricket, so we'll leave him to the side for now. If you're looking at Hope and Chase, Hope averages 25 in Test cricket. Yeah, Chase averages 26. If we're considering Chase as a batter primarily, so basically, if you're looking at experience with those batters, they've basically got experience of being terrible at Test cricket as well. Like, you're not bringing in them for anything. However, I will agree with the Blackwood metric. Blackwood averaged 31. So if we're dropping in based on that, we have to hold the team to the same standards. You can't. I agree. You can never have in sports. You can never have a complacency culture where players are thinking, even if I do bad in this series, I'm gonna get the next series. There should always sort of be not the fear factor, but the acknowledgement that your place could be at risk if you're not performing well consistently. But if we're looking at experienced players, Nkrumah Bonner, someone we talked about, for me that's mind baffling as to how we dropped a man with 38 average, why he's not in the side. But I don't think we'll ever see Nkrumah Bonner play. No,
his time is done. His time is done. Yeah.
I mean, Jermaine Blackwood, did he play for Jamaica Scorpions earlier season?
Yeah, he was awful. He was awful. I'm not trying to argue. Let me just clear that up for people. I'm not trying to say Blackwood should come back. I'm just using him as a metric to say when we decided Desmond Haynes and Roland Butcher decided we're not taking Blackwood to Australia because he's too reckless. He doesn't convert. And remember, he was vice captain at the time. He doesn't convert. He only averages 31 after X amount of tests. I'm just saying, at the time I was like, okay, cool. But whoever you bring next, they better be averaging that minimum. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
But my point is, if we're looking at experienced players, who we can bring into the side, and let's say they were put in that scenario where you're chasing 263, who can kind of try and steer us to victory, two names spring to mind, basically. Nkrumah Bonner and Darren Barrow. That's it. The two names, basically. And neither of them, they're both in the wilderness. Neither of them are going to play Test cricket again. I would argue at this point in West Indies cricket, unless your name is Darren Barrow and Nkrumah Bonner, there's no one in the region who has sufficient experience who can help this West Indies side. I don't care if you're calling up Hope, Chase, whoever. There's no one who's got experience of performing in tough situations to help this Test side. So based on that and the lack of options, that's why I would persist with these guys for at least the Bangladesh series.
So let me tell you something, Santokie. If I reached out to DJ Bravo and by proxy Darren Bravo and said, come on, Darren, I know you're vexed because you felt like Desmond Haynes and Roland Butcher did you dirty after you top scored in Super 50 and then they ignored you and so on and so forth. You took a break from cricket. Bravo's still only 35. And before anyone says that's too old, it's not too old, right? If I reached out to Darren Bravo tomorrow and convinced him to come back to regional cricket, would he have to prove himself again, yet again, in the Red Bull season? Or would you be calling up at the first moment of, like, say there was a spot available because someone's just down bad? Would you turn to a Darren Bravo?
Yeah, 100%. I think his age doesn't matter. He 35 isn't too old. We've seen it in sports. But it adds incentive to this because we can't afford to wait another year for Darren Bravo to come back. He'll be 36 by the time the first class season starts. So based on that, I would call him up if there was, a spot in the side, middle order. Similar to, it's tricky with Nkrumah Bonner as well. See, this is where we would like to see like an A-team tour or some sort of Red Bull cricket in this period, so players can sort of come in and play it. But I would take the gamble on Darren Bravo at this point, just because he would add something to the middle order. But Mash, if Darren Bravo, all right, so let's say you called Darren Bravo up, he said, yeah, cool, I'm ready, like new selection panel, I'm ready to come back to West Indies cricket. Who would you bring him in for in this West Indies side? Who would be, what would you make? What decision would you make?
So it's not realistic. It's not realistic to bring. I'm with you that it's not realistic to bring anybody in for Bangladesh. I would expect this same batting order to play versus Bangladesh. However, at the end of that Bangladesh series, if anybody is still down bad, they're out the team. That's me personally. If they play 4 innings against Bangladesh and can't score more than 25 runs, they're out the team. And I think that's fair. Because by then, Hodge would have played 11 tests, Louis would have played 9, and Athanaze would have played 13. I think that is enough time to make your decision as to whether they need to... Because remember, what would happen next is we would go to Pakistan in January for 2 tests, but the first class season would also have started by the beginning of February. So at the end of Bangladesh, you should have enough evidence to say to yourself, does one of these guys need to go back to the first class season to go work on their game a bit, or should we take them to Pakistan? And here's your problem, though. Here's the problem, or the point that you made, though, Santokie. There's nothing else to then find someone else. We haven't played first class cricket since May. So there's no A-team cricket. There's nothing to go off to then say, let's bring my man to go to Pakistan instead. Which is why I'm saying to you, well, it might as well be Super 50. Because what else are they going to base it on? It can't be because it can't be because Amir Jangu scored 500 runs all the way back in March and April. That doesn't make sense.
But then hold on. But then the argument, so from Bravo, the argument would be he scored 600 runs all the way back in April 2023. Because you're not basing on anything.
Oh God! Santokie, the system is broken. The system's absolutely broken. Guys.
It's the Matrix out here, man. But Mash, I think, all right. So we've basically clarified like the problem with this West Indies side. A 263 chase. 263 was very gettable on this surface because it was only day 3 at Providence. It hadn't even turned enough for spin to be a madness at that point. 260 was gettable. Inexperience largely played a part. We saw Alec Athanaze done a sweep. I think it was of Maharaj, which kind of lost composure. So all of that, is fine. Inexperience. Explain to me, for instance, Jason Holder just swinging it when the match was still in the balance, for instance, and that kind of and so that scenario. Also, us having South Africa 97 for 9 in the first innings and unable to take the 10th wicket partnership. Surely we can't just blame that on, these are new guys inexperienced. Surely that is something which is the coach needs to work on, and is something which is a psychological issue within the team, because Holder as a senior player in that team shouldn't be doing that shot with the match still in the balance. West Indies between them, Seals, Shamar, Joseph, Moti, Warwick, and surely they could think of something along with Craig Brathwaite tactically to get that last wicket out. So surely there's more to it than just simplifying it to, these guys haven't played enough cricket. There's also fundamental problems with the sort of psychology in the team and that ability to be clinical.
I
don't know.
I'm under pressure right now. I'm under pressure. I know Jason's watching. Jason's at the screen right now doing this. What are you about to say about me? What are you saying?
Jason's at your door, fam.
Listen, with Jason, this is no excuse. And Jason would, Jason would have to be big enough to hold his hand up and say, "There's just no excuse." Because I was about to try and come up with an excuse, But no, Jason's played too many games of cricket for there to be any level of excuse for that, right? Someone like an Athenaeus, I'm not excusing Athenaeus, but what I will say is they've just not played, and it showed in a lot of the dismissals across the two test matches and in England. Some of these guys just haven't played enough high level pressure cricket. And what I mean by that is, so Alex shot, for example, to Maharaj was absolutely not just poor execution, it just didn't make any sense, right? And in terms of the situation. Yes, he was under pressure, couldn't really find anyone, couldn't tuck the ball off the square to get off strike. So I get the pressure situation, but it's deeper than that for me. These guys aren't used to regularly playing against players who won't let up the pressure, who will regularly land the ball in the same spot over after over after over and just keep asking you questions. So I guess what I would then say from that is there is some kind, it's not just it's not mental weakness per se, but it's certainly a level of not knowing how to deal with the pressure because they don't face that pressure in regional cricket. It's as simple as that. The competition and standards in regional cricket simply aren't high enough to prepare you for the pressurized state of high level cricket against good cricketers. So right now we're kind of in a situation where we're a 1 in 5 team. I crunched some stats earlier on. Since India at home last year. So India at home last year, only Athenaeus and Brathwaite averaged over 30. Australia away this year. Was it this year? Yeah, Australia away this year, only Mackenzie averaged over 30. England away this year, only Hodge averaged over 30. And South Africa at home this year, only Holder averaged over 30. Santokie, there is no international side that can go into series after series knowing that out of their top 6, only one man's going to perform. And when we say perform, we're not even talking about world class performance. We're just talking about the bare minimum, right? So we are a 1 in 5 team. And that's not to attack the players, that's not to criticize the players. It's the simple, harsh reality of where we are at. And that's why I get pissed off when simpletons message me going, change the captain. What the
Listen.
No, I'm done, Santokie. I'm done, Santokie.
You know, Mash is so deep in his feelings, like he risked the YouTube advert monetization with them.
I said no peas on YouTube today. I've had enough, man. I've had enough.
You know what? Yeah, you're right. The standard is abysmal. And even going back to that Holder thing, yeah, if Holder was batting with Moti or Warwick, I can understand why he just gave it away and thought, you know what, we're batting with the tail. Josh De Silva was there with him. We've seen that Josh De Silva can dig in when needs be and soak up balls. Even in Bangladesh, when he teamed up with Bonner to kind of get us across the line in one of the tests. So the fact he gave it away there was abysmal. And it added fuel to the fire that Moti and Warwick straight after were able to hit sixes and score runs. And we only lost, at the end of the day, we only lost by 41. So Holder putting up runs isn't going to fundamentally change the systematic issues of West Indies cricket. However, in the context of that match, him putting up runs when needed and not play that stupid shot could have taken us across the line. So for me, that was a disappointment. But, you know, Mash, you've had enough of a cuss out there. I think you've reached breaking point. Let's focus on... Hey, that might be the most vex I've ever seen Mash. Microphone getting flung, everything.
God, I've had enough cuss.
Let's focus on the positive. So obviously, Shamar Joseph and Jaden Seals stood out as, the two shining lights. I want to talk on one bit first. Obviously, Shamar Joseph came in for the second test. We thought potentially one option would be he'd come in for Warwick or Moti. Or we did speculate maybe Kimar Roach might go there. In the end, they called out Kimar Roach. Now, do you see this as symbolic, Mash, that this is the beginning of them sort of phasing Kimar Roach out? He's 36 years old now. He didn't play in the England tests, so there's not an issue of, fitness or using him for too many games. He bowled 26 overs in the first test at Queen's Park Oval, and then he's taken out of this test. Do you think this is essentially Kohli and West Indies sort of saying, listen, we need to prepare for life after Kemar Roach, so we can't play him in every test and rely on him.
Yeah, and I think that's fair enough as well. In that, what I liked was there was a point in the test match where I think the camera panned to Roach speaking to Seals, and I was like, this is good because this is the point almost. You don't have to play Roach in every test, and Roach's skill set means that he can play a mentorship role. He's still a locker room leader, right? Yeah. So he can play a mentorship role to a Shamar Joseph, to a Jaden Seals. So my argument would always be this going forward, not that we play enough test matches, but my argument would be you always pick Roach until he actually retires, and you just don't have to play him in every test. Now, the problem is in a 2-match test series, an argument would be, well, why are you carrying him then? But put it this way, if Shamar Joseph or Jaden Seals broke down, I'd rather have Kemar Roach on my bench than Alzari Joseph on my bench. If you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I get 2 for 1 with Kemar Roach. 1, he can mentor my younger bowlers when they're going through a bad spell, or what do I do now in my next spell? And 2, I know that should one get injured, he at least bowls with some control. So, and then I would encourage West Indies to do that until the point at which Kemar Roach retires. The bigger question, Santokie, is I don't think Alzari Joseph gets back in this team yet.
Yeah.
That's actually the bigger question right now. Even if they said they were resting Alzari Joseph, obviously he's not been named in the T20 squad, so maybe it is legitimately a rest. When we play Bangladesh at home, even if we want to kill them with pace, unless we're playing in Antigua and Jamaica. Maybe in Jamaica you might want to hit Bangladesh with a pace barrage, but there's no guarantee for me that Alzari Joseph walks back into this side.
No, because you've got Shamar, Seals, Roach ahead of him, and you'd imagine they pick Moti or Warwican as a spinner. So Alzari Joseph, essentially, you'd imagine if everyone is fit, would ride the bench and not be an automatic pick. But as you said, Mash, what links back to what you said earlier perfectly, you can't have complacency in this side. We shouldn't have a scenario where Alzari Joseph walks back into the 11 because he's Alzari Joseph, for instance. It should be a case of, listen, you weren't good enough. These are the levels. Look at what Shamar and Seals are doing. These are the levels we want you to be at. Work on that. And hopefully that should provide motivation for him. But at the end of the day, it's a good problem for West Indies to have a good bowling attack. And Alzari Joseph, who's not informed, but we know what he can do, to be around as well. Ideally, you'd like to see, again, one more young fast bowler coming through who can kind of get up to international level. But overall, I think West Indies cricket, we've said this for the last few years, our bowling is not really an issue. We're kind of good on the bowling front, and we saw that in this test match. It's mainly the batting, which is horrendous, down bad, horrendous. With the averages that you quoted and sort of the performances of the batters, you can have an all-time great bowling attack, Garner, Marshall, Holding. They still won't be able to win West Indies test matches because you ultimately need to put up runs, which is what we don't do. So bowling for me is not an issue. Against Bangladesh, we'll bowl Bangladesh out 4 times. Like, it's not an issue. We'll do that. It's whether we can put up substantial scores and get the win. And that's going to be the big question mark. And that's something, as you said, there's no obvious remedy for that.
Listen, we've probably gone over time here, so I will just end with this point. And it's something that Santokie and I can come back to touch on in a later episode. But obviously, after this test match defeat, a lot of people message us saying, so now what? What do West Indies do? This, that. What about this? What about that? The only tangible thing that I think West Indies could do in the short term, and it wouldn't really work for Bangladesh because we've got Super 50 probably around that time. But my recommendation going forward, similar to what happened in Australia, is that before every major test series where there has been a massive break before we play a test series, have an A-team tour in similar conditions against somebody. Santokie, I was thinking about this earlier today. It probably was no coincidence that we went to Australia and competed better than people thought we did, because we literally were in South Africa no less than a couple of weeks before we went to Australia in a 3-match A-team series of red ball cricket. When we play Bangladesh, we wouldn't have played red ball cricket for 3 months. I don't think we can fit an A-team series in necessarily because of Super 50, but if I'm Cricket West Indies, I'm trying to forward plan. And I'm looking at Super 50 squads, and I'm potentially saying to the Super 50 franchises and saying, so like Craig Brathwaite, for example, you should not be playing in Barbados' Super 50 squad. You're never going to get into the West Indies ODI side, so you can certainly go play some cricket in some A-team tour somewhere. Let me pick somebody else. The problem is the rest of them will be in the Super 50 side. That's the problem. So it probably don't work before Bangladesh. Bangladesh would be prepped for Pakistan. But after Pakistan, Santokie, I don't think we play another test series till Australia come to the Caribbean, which is a 6-month gap between Pakistan away and Australia at home. Again, they will say the Red Ball season is the prep, but I mean, they just need to think outside the box, I guess is what I'm saying. Because if we keep doing the same thing, we already know it's not going to change anything. So we can't just keep repeating and then being surprised, not us, but other people, when things don't work to plan. We got to start thinking outside the box. But that's for another episode for another day, possibly.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, because after that India series, if we didn't play any red ball cricket and we just waited to the Australia series in January, there'd be no Shamar Joseph. He emerged in that A-team tour against South Africa. So you need it, as you rightly said, we can't just rely on waiting 12 months until February for the red ball season to start, because we need to find players throughout the year who can kind of perform and who are in form. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, a lot of change in Cricket West Indies behind the scenes as well. Johnny Graves stepping down as chief executive in October. Even the new selection panel and the process, we've heard rumours about it and what it compromises, but I don't think there's been an official statement or breakdown of sort of how that works. And so behind the scenes, administratively, there's obviously a lot of change and upheaval, and that could lead to changes in sort of how teams are selected and the tours we see in the coming months. But as ever, if you do want to stay up to date with everything going around the region, not just one island or one nation, only one place you can get that information, Caribbean Cricket Podcast. So behind the scenes, on the field, whatever's going on, we'll be here to update you. Twitter, Instagram, videos, podcasts, you name it. So make sure you're following Caribbean Cricket. Like, comment, share, follow the movement. And Mash, I think you need, what are you saying, Ray and Nephew after that?
Listen, I might have to edit out the swearing, because YouTube might lock off the channel, so I might have to go edit everything. So if you lot are listening to this now going, what swearing? It's because I edited it out by the time I posted the thing.
Listen, man said, bond the gentleman's game, Anyways, guys, that's been Machel, myself, Caribbean Cricket Podcast. We'll be back very soon, actually, because as Machel alluded to earlier, West Indies also dropped, amidst all this chaos, we forgot that West Indies are playing the T20 series against South Africa on Friday. They've named the squad. A lot of headlines in that, which we're going to dissect and analyze in the coming days. So keep an eye out for that. But as ever, stay tuned and obviously comment your opinions. Do you agree or disagree with what we said? How would you change this West Indies test side? We'd love to hear it. So thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.